And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We've got some classic winter weather to talk about today. The big story, in my opinion, going on across the country are these 30 to 50 degree below average temperatures that are going to be building into especially the northern and then eventually the eastern half of the country throughout the next 2 weeks. You can see that cold air just continuing to spread out 50 degrees below average throughout the Midwest, working all the way down into Oklahoma and even Texas at some points, and then eventually up into the Northeast. So we've got cold weather, and we also have some snowy weather. We have a number of snowstorms that are going to be building in across the country over the next few days into this next weekend, and one of them actually looks like it could be a major snowstorm, so we're going to spend a large amount of time on that one specifically. You can see a number of those smaller storms right there. And then as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday, that's where this big storm starts to form. And that has the potential to turn into a major snowstorm, possibly dropping over a foot of snow in some locations. So lots to talk about. Classic winter weather today. Two things I will say. One, if you're watching this video after the live stream, you'll be able to go down in the comments below where I put the timestamps for the different weather stories we're going to be talking about. So you'll be able to just click straight to the region you're most interested in. Now, the other thing I'll mention is also if you're watching this after the live stream, you may want to make sure this is actually my most recent forecast, because I do these every single day, and weather is one of those things where the forecast models change every single day, so it's important to know that you're staying up to date with the most recent information. So with that being said, I think now would be a good time to get going, and let's start with just a national overview, go over the big stories that are happening across the entire country, and the big one is that cold air. 30 to 50 degrees below average temperatures building in over the next 2 weeks. And I say building in because it's already begun. You can see parts of Montana already 30 to 50 degrees below average. So remember, that's below average. I'm not saying 50 degrees below just straight up in Fahrenheit. Although with the wind chill, there are some locations in Montana that feel like it is 50 degrees below zero Fahrenheit in actual temperatures, not just anomaly. So you can watch this cold air as it continues to fill in throughout the country. Midwest is going to be feeling it throughout this week. Montana is just getting the worst of this though, because the high pressure is right here, which I'll show this graphic in a second, where it shows the high pressure here, low pressure here, and they're working together to just pull this cold air in. And throughout this entire system, it seems like that cold air continues to be pulled directly over Montana. So cold week there, but cold in other places as well. You can see as we get into this weekend especially, that's where this cold air is being pulled in enough to really start spreading out, going all the way from Texas, where we're 35 below average, up into the Midwest, where we're 40 below average. And then that eventually is going to spread east. You think about it, weather typically moves from west to east, so that cold air is eventually going to work its way up into the northeast towards the start of next week, maybe even a little bit this weekend as well. So this is just a graphic that shows overall what I was just talking about. You can see the entire country below average temperatures, except for the very tip of Florida, which you might not even be able to see in this live stream. California is actually one area we're going to dive into as well today, because that's where there has been a big shift in the weather forecast from what I was saying last week. Last week, it was showing a big ridge over California, sunny and warm for the next 2 weeks. Now there's a few storms that look like they're going to be building in, and you can see now we're showing up as being affected by this cold air. You can see who's getting affected the most though. The northern states working into the Midwest and even all the way down into Oklahoma. That's where we're getting those 30 to 50 degree below average temperatures. And this is just an average of what we're going to be seeing over the next 2 weeks. You can see cold air basically for everybody. Now this is a better graphic that shows what I was just talking about. There's that high pressure. There's the low pressure. And not going to get too sciencey here or dive into this too much, but if you think about the winds, around a low, they're counterclockwise, and you can actually see them on this graphic. It's a little harder to see the ones around the high pressure because the winds aren't as strong, which is typical for a high pressure. But the ones around the high pressure are actually going clockwise. So when you think about that, the low is pulling this air right here, and the high is pulling that air as well. So you have this region right here that is just getting affected by the low and the high, and that's what's pulling all this cold air in. Hopefully that made some sense right there. It's basically these two systems lining up in the direction of their wind, and that's why this air is being pulled into the country just so aggressively. You can see it minus 15 degrees in Omaha. We're getting minus 10 in St. Paul, and that's actually warm compared to what we're going to be seeing later in the forecast. There are a couple of periods here where keep a close eye out, but you might be able to see some minus 20 to minus 30 below zero temperatures here. An easier way to look at, I know the exact numbers are hard to see, where you have blue, that means you're below freezing. Where you have purple, that means you're below zero. So if we zoomed into Montana here, you can see that's minus 15 right there. But then everywhere where you have that blue color, that's where you're still below freezing, which is 32 degrees. And then as we click through here, this is what's going on. Wow, that's actually a pretty awesome illustration of what's happening here. Keep an eye on this purple blob of cold Arctic air right there. As I click forward, you can see it advancing and just spreading out into the country. It almost looks like smoke pouring over the country, and that's kind of what it is. It's all fluid dynamics type stuff. So you can see we're now getting into the 13th and the 14th. If you have plans for Valentine's Day, you might want to make them inside because Rapid City minus 30 degrees, St. Paul minus 20, Iowa City minus 13. And that's no longer talking about how off the average you are. That is just straight up Fahrenheit temperatures, minus 13 degrees, below zero. And then you can see that purple air with that high pressure system, the one I was just showing that's pulling this cold air in the first place. As the high pressure system moves east, that cold air is going to move east as well, which makes sense because it's the high that's helping to pull that in with the combination of the low. So as the high moves into the northeast, that's where the northeast starts to get those below zero temperatures as well. And that's working all the way into the 16th. So this is what's going to be driving weather, at least temperature-wise, for the majority of the country, especially at least the northern parts, although it does get down into Texas at some points. This is what's going to be driving the temperatures for most of the country for as far off into the forecast as we can even look. Now, there's also some other interesting stuff going on. It's not just temperatures. We're also dealing with some snowstorms. And this is another thing that has changed significantly since the forecast models last week. Now it looks like there's going to be a number of little snowstorms building through, and then one possible major snowstorm. So you keep your eye out here on the northwest, the northern states, the Midwest, the Northeast here, and then even West Virginia and Virginia as well. That's the bullseye of where this major storm could be building in later this week. So you see through here, we have some tiny little snowstorms building into the Northeast. Another one down in the plains that's going to build. Here is that major one that has the potential. And it actually originated up in the Northwest where we got some light rain and snow. And then as it works into the middle of the country, that's where it has a combination of two things. It's bringing down some of that cold Arctic air, and then it's also bringing in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. Those two things combine, strengthen the storm, and you can see it actually start to strengthen as we get into our forecast for Thursday. That's where it continues to bring the cold air down, continues to push in the moisture, and that's where we start getting widespread rain throughout the southeast and some heavy snowfall throughout the Midwest. Looks like it's light snowfall with this one. Where we get the heavy snowfall is West Virginia, Virginia, and then working into the coast where some locations could be picking up over a foot with that. We're really going to dive into the local maps to see how much snow we're going to be getting with that one. Where is it going to fall? When is it going to fall? With this possible major storm. And then you can see, looks like there's another one behind it. and that's going to be affecting the northwest. And then who knows what's going to happen by the time that actually gets to the eastern half of the country. A lot can happen over the next week or two. So I always like to just take a broad look at who's getting precipitation and where. So we'll just click through here, ignore the northern states. I'll show you the snowfall totals in a second. This is more useful to look at who's getting the heavy rainfall. You can see the coast of California. That's one of the big stories we have to talk about today. Big change in the weather forecast. We were supposed to be totally sunny and warm for the next 2 weeks. Now you can see we have a number of storms pushing through. So we'll look at that. The big ones, though, are where we had that major storm that I was just showing, the one that could bring a foot of snow to West Virginia and Virginia. That's going to bring heavy rain to the southeast. Some locations in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, getting 1 inch to 2 inches with that one. Possibly even getting up to 3 or 4 if you're in some of the locations that are in the bullseye of that heavy rain. Now I know it's winter, people are always interested in what's going on with the snowfall, so it actually perfectly illustrates what's going on here. It all starts in the northwest, and I'll show you a graphic that explains that in a second too. Starts in the northwest, and then it builds into the midwest, and then into the northeast. Weather moves from west to east. So that's just the minor one. I'll show you the impacts expected with that. It's just some minor impacts there. The one where we could have some major impacts is later as we build into Thursday and Friday. You see those bullseyes of heavy snowfall build into West Virginia, and then along the coast, and even Pennsylvania as well. Really going to be watching that one to see where that ends up, because that is one of those storms that's a ways off in the forecast. So it's questionable if that's actually what's going to end up happening. I typically have the rule of thumb where I don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. So what I'm saying is going to happen over the next 3 days, that's what I think you could be confident. What's past 3 days, including this storm, is what you'll have to continue to check in, because I guarantee that will change. It's just a question of how it will change. Maybe it'll move north, maybe it'll move south, maybe it'll just be 2 inches of snow, maybe it'll be 2 feet of snow. That's what makes weather interesting. There's always something to stay updated with and follow. Now, one of the best places to start, though, is looking at the warnings, because that tells you what you should be worrying about today. And what's the most important thing today? Just fog warnings in California, and then a number of winter weather advisories. We got them in Washington, Idaho, Montana, and then in the middle of the country, and then working into the Midwest as well. I would say I should probably be careful when saying that warnings aren't that serious, but for me, looking at the storm, I think it looks like a minor storm to me, this one that we're going to be getting over the next day or two. But again, don't take my word for it. Check your local resources too for any safety concerns. I think these warnings, it's looking like a minor storm. The one that's interesting is what's going to be happening to West Virginia and Virginia here later in the week. You can see it's so much later in the week that they aren't putting the warnings on it yet, because this shows you what you should be thinking about right now. Also interesting to note, we have a red flag warning. I typically do wildfire forecast videos over this last fire season, and it's weird to see still a red flag. That must mean we have some warm temperatures, some wind, and some dry humidity there. So if you live in, sorry about that, if you live in the New Mexico area, watch out for that red flag warning. That means there could be some fire danger. So let's take a look at the Winter Storm Severity Index. So this is what I mostly go off when I'm deciding if I think a storm is going to be major or not, because this takes in a bunch of different factors and then tells you what the impacts are going to be. And you can see why I'm not too worried about those warnings. You can see just minor impacts expected. That's what that yellow color shows there in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Man, I need to take a quick drink of water. 1 second. Okay, normally I would have edited this video, stop, and then start over, but this is live streaming, so that's what you got to do. So we got minor impacts throughout the Midwest and Northeast. Where we do have one area where we have moderate impacts is where we could be getting some heavier snowfall mixed with some stronger winds around New York City. So that is one thing to think about, just moderate though. Like I said, this isn't what the big story is today. The big story today is what's going to be going on in West Virginia and Virginia with that possible major storm later in the week, and then also what's going on with that cold blast of Arctic air. And that doesn't show up on this map, but that's certainly what's driving weather throughout the West right now, and then will be spreading out throughout the rest of the country as we move forward in the forecast. So even though it doesn't look like there's much happening in the West, I think that'd be a good place to start because there are some interesting things going on, and that's where our weather originates. Like I said, weather moves from west to east. So if you want to know what's going to happen in the east, you got to start in the west. So let's just see. You see there's some snow falling right now. That's going to continue, but actually ease up as we work into Tuesday morning. And then the theme of the week, multiple snowstorms. Right where you think you're in the clear, that's where another one pushes in. And that seems to be the theme for the entire West Coast over the next week or two. Little storm in the clear, little storm in the clear. And then the one big storm that looks like it could be coming in is this Friday. So the 12th, and that looks like an actual system right there, not just some light rain and snow. That looks like it could have widespread rain and snow throughout California, Oregon, Washington, up into Idaho and Montana as well. And then looks like there might be another one behind that as you get into Valentine's Day. So again, you might want to change your Valentine's Day plans if you made them based on my forecast last week that California was going to be warm and sunny. So that's probably the first thing I need to address when going over the West, because that's the biggest change in the weather forecast. Last week, the forecast models were showing for California, it basically looked like this for 2 straight weeks. It looked like California was staying under this little ridge right here, and there was nothing that was going to be affecting it. And that's how this weekend was. It was like this. It was totally sunny. San Francisco felt like it was 70 degrees, no wind, absolutely beautiful. Felt like summer, to be honest. Actually, it felt nicer than summer in San Francisco. And that's how I was thinking it was going to be for the next 2 weeks, because that's what these models were showing. As it turns out, weather always keeps you on your toes. There have been some changes. As you see, as we get into Wednesday, there's a little bump where that ridge that we were enjoying turns into a tiny little trough right here, a little low pressure system that goes through. Doesn't look like it's anything major, but it's certainly not the ridge that we were supposed to have. And then on Friday into Saturday, another little one comes through. So that's the theme for the West, multiple little storms. And then the big one is that one that could be coming in Sunday. We're going to have to keep our eye on that because that has the potential to bring lots of rain, lots of snow. But yeah, just had to bring that up because what a change from the forecast models last week where there was a consistent ridge over California. Now we have 3 little low pressure systems moving through. So let's actually look at what that precipitation is going to look like. See, the first little bits actually showing up early on Tuesday morning around 4 a.m. And you can see though, light rain, light snow, nothing really to get too excited about. Barely even looks like a system, but certainly not the ridge we were supposed to have. Then not much going on through Wednesday and Thursday. As we get into late Thursday night into Friday, that's where we have an actual storm. That looks like it could have some heavy rain along the coast right there, building into some heavy snow for the Sierras and widespread rain throughout the entire Bay Area and Northern California. That's going to stick around a little bit longer than that first system, drop some more rain into the central coast, and then more snow into the Sierras. So if you're going up to Tahoe for Valentine's Day, there's probably going to be some fresh snow up there with that system right there. Now let's just take a look at that next one that comes through on Sunday. That's the one that looks like it's a bit stronger. That's where we could get some heavier rain, heavier snow. And that, like I said, looks like an actual system right there. Heavy snow for Nevada as well, moving into Utah and Arizona and passing through. So let's look at the totals that we could be getting. Like I said, with that first one, light storm, lucky to get an inch in the Sierras. The next one, is going to bring a little bit more, get us up to maybe 5 inches by Saturday. It looks like the one after that packs an even bigger punch, and that could get us over a foot in some places of the Sierras. And remember, that's on top of what we've already picked up. With that storm a couple weeks ago, we picked up over 10 feet in some places. So you can see, certainly not the ridge, warm temperatures and sunshine that we're supposed to have, but it is winter and we are in a drought, so I'll take the rain and snow any chance we can get it. Now, the other part of this forecast that is possibly even more interesting than what's going on in California is what's going on in the upper Northwest. Washington, Idaho, Montana, that's where we're going to be getting some significant snow over the next week or two. In California, you could see possibility of getting up to a foot. Well, I would say it's a great possibility we get up to a foot in Washington, Idaho, and Montana, maybe even getting a foot and a half to 2 feet in some places. So let's just click back here and see. It's basically the theme of the week for the West. Multiple snowstorms, light snow here and there, especially in the higher elevations and the northern locations of the state where it's a bit colder. That's going to be the theme. The big one coming in is that one coming in Friday. That looks like it's going to have bigger impacts over Washington, Idaho, and Montana than it did over California. And then that next one on Saturday into Sunday. Looks like it hits a little bit earlier down here, and that's because it is moving from north to south. That has some widespread snow, especially in the Cascades where we have some of those heavier snowfall rates. So let's look at the totals that we can be expecting. Just going to be small systems moving in over the next week, couple of bigger storms later in the forecast. In total, though, by around this time next week, that's where some parts of the Cascades could be getting over 2 feet. I'd say safe bet is a foot and a half. And then throughout Idaho, we have a bullseye, foot and a half to possibly 2 feet of snow. And then western Montana getting another 6 to 10 inches. So you can see number of systems moving through the Northwest, and the effect that'll have is just constant accumulations of snow. It doesn't look like there's any periods where it's extreme snowfall rates, but since it's falling, it seems like entire week long, that's where you can total up and get up to a foot or two. Now, the other big story for the Northwest, though, on top of that snow, is what's going on with the cold temperatures. And Montana is certainly, I would say Montana is going to be the coldest place in the country for this next week. And it's because we have that low pressure up here, high pressure up here, and it's just pulling this cold air in from the Arctic right over Montana this entire time. This is showing temperature anomalies, which is basically just a fancy way of saying your temperature above or below average. You can see in Montana, we're 30 to 50 degrees below average, and that's due to that cold air being pulled in. And unfortunately, it's not going to be going anywhere. It seems to be sticking around. This is now all the way into the 11th, still directly over Montana, 30 to 40 degrees below average, even getting 50s as we work into the 12th. And then that continues all the way into the 14th, still 30 to 40 degrees. When are we finally in the clear? Looks like we're finally in the clear the 15th. Until then, Montana looks like it's going to be 30 to 40 degrees below average, which mixed with the wind chill in some places could actually feel like 30 to 40 below zero. So if we want to actually see those temperatures, we can go into this map. Before we look at the exact temperatures, I'll just zoom out here so you can see that mechanism I was talking about. You got the low pressure up here, counterclockwise winds. That means on the left side of it, it's pulling this air down here. Now right below that, we have this high pressure, which is clockwise winds, which means on the upper part of this high, it's pulling that cold air in the exact same direction that the low is. So you have these two systems working together to pull this cold air in from Canada and the Arctic. And that is why it's going to be so cold in Montana. It's the high pressure system that's over the Midwest. It's always interesting to see how connected weather is. If we want to actually look at some of these temperatures, though, you can see this cold air has already begun. These are showing actual temperatures now, -10, below zero. And then as we continue through, not going to be going anywhere. Actually, looks like it's going to be getting colder. As we go into Tuesday, that's where we're looking like maybe 15 to 20 degrees below zero. And unfortunately, that's going to continue and possibly even get colder and more widespread as we work into this next weekend, where large portions of the state are 20 below. And I have a buddy who lives up here. I'm going to have to ask him, because he lives in Elk Park, which is one of the coldest places in the entire United States. And it's already one of the coldest places in the United States. So I can't imagine how cold it is when you're 30 to 40 degrees below your average. So you can see here, as we get into Thursday, Great Falls, almost 30 below zero. And that's going to continue as that high, which is pulling this cold air down, moves directly over the state. So as that high moves through, that's going to be getting into Friday and this weekend. That's where temperatures get really cold. We're now looking 30 below zero. And you have to think about the fact that you're going to be mixing those cold temperatures with some winds. So when you mix cold temperatures with winds, that's where you get a wind chill, and that 20 to 30 below actually feels like 50 below. So that's going to be a big story I'll be following all week long, and maybe even further than that into the forecast. Now, you can see that cold air isn't only affecting Montana and other parts of the Northwest, it's also affecting the Midwest here. So let's transition, let's go back and actually look at this overall system again, and then dive into this cold air as it moves into the Midwest. So you can see again, it's that low pressure system up here that has the counterclockwise flow, which means on the bottom part, it's pulling this air in from Canada towards the Midwest. And then right over the Midwest, we have this high pressure system that has the clockwise flow, which means on the upper part of that, it's pulling that cold air in the exact same direction right into the Midwest. You can see this, you're going to start feeling this throughout the day today. It looked like early this morning, you were below freezing, but still relatively in the clear from this Arctic blast of cold air. As you get into this afternoon and tonight, that's where these purple temperatures start coming in, which signify where you're below zero. That's going to be working into Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska. You can see Omaha, minus 17 as you work into early Tuesday morning. Green Bay, minus 10. And watch as this cold air continues to spread out as that high pressure system just moves across the country. It's certainly not going anywhere, and it actually looks like there's another little high that'll be moving in behind it, which will pull that cold air even farther south, all the way down into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. This is now looking at Sunday the 14th. That's where it's going to get really cold. Working into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when this new high pressure system moves in, that's where you're below zero throughout the majority of the Midwest. And again, it's all because of these temperature anomalies that are being pulled down. If you want to look at this another way, this is now showing how off of average you are. So I know people throughout the northern locations of the US, you're used to cold weather. But if you're used to the average, this shows you how far off the average you're going to be. And as you can see, 30 to 40 to even 50 degrees off the average in the cold direction. So that's what's building in. It looks like it almost slightly eases up on Thursday, and then there's a second blast of cold air that comes in just with a vengeance on Saturday. Looks like it's even colder than that first blast. That's where we get 45, 50 degrees below average throughout the entire Midwest. That's interesting that it's two different pulses, and it actually makes sense because it looks like it is two separate high pressure systems that move through and separately bring that cold air down. So that's the big story that's going on. I think for the Midwest, the cold temperatures, that's going to be very significant, abnormal. By definition, you're 40 degrees below average. So certainly significant there, but you also have some other winter weather going on. And that has to do with the snowstorms that you're going to be getting throughout this week. Now, just like the Northwest, it's a number of little snowstorms and then one possible big snowstorm that we're really going to be diving into throughout this live stream. So you can see that high pressure system. That's the one that's bringing in the cold air. But you can see with all that cold air and some of the moisture, it is going to be dropping light little bits of snow over the Midwest throughout the day today and working into Tuesday as well. Now here is where we start to build that possible major snowstorm. It's going to be a major snowstorm, I believe, for West Virginia and Virginia, but you can see we're also going to be getting some of that snow in the southern locations of the Midwest, like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. And we're going to have to watch that because typically I don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. So it's a little iffy on where exactly that storm is going to be. We'll have to keep our eye on it. But as of right now, that looks like it has the potential to become a major snowstorm. And it makes sense. You're pulling in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and you're pulling down cold air from the Arctic. That's just a perfect combination for a major snowstorm. Moisture, Arctic air, lots of snow. So let's actually dive in and see where we're going to be getting snow in the Midwest. Let's go to this morning. Some light snow right there. Not much. And then just like in the Northwest, there's a number of little tiny systems, little dips in the overall flow that drop some snow over Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. This is now getting into tonight and early tomorrow morning. And then as we get into, well, this is still early tomorrow morning, that's where that snow starts to get widespread over Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. That's going to move through, and then that is that possible major snowstorm that we're going to be watching. You can see stretching throughout the southern parts of the Midwest. It'll be interesting to watch where this actually ends up falling because there is the possibility that low ends up moving north like the last storm did this last week and brings heavy snowfall to Wisconsin and Michigan. As of right now, it looks like the bulk was in the southern states, but then on the back end of it, that's where the snow finally works into Wisconsin and Michigan as we get into Friday. So I think the theme for this week is just classic winter weather. It's going to be literally freezing, and there's just going to be a number of snowstorms moving over the Midwest. Seems like every single day there's a new little one moving through, and then that possible big one that we're going to have to keep our eye on. This is what you're going to be getting by this time tomorrow. You can see it's mostly in the southern states where we have 1 inch to possibly 3 inches in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And then as we continue to click through, that's that major snowstorm. You can see for the most part, it's going into West Virginia and Virginia. We'll look at that in a second. But looks like we're going to be getting some throughout the southern parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, or Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio here. What we'll have to see is if those heavy accumulations can spread out a little bit farther all the way into Illinois. As we continue to click through and we get some more little tiny snowstorms, you can see widespread areas of the Midwest getting about 1 inch or 2 of snow over the next week. This is showing by next week, this is what you'll have picked up. And then really the bullseye, it appears throughout the next week is going to be, like I said, the southern locations where we could be getting 5 to 6 inches throughout Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. The key spot to watch, though, is if those major accumulations can find their way into the Midwest. When it comes to impacts, this basically sums it up. Minor impacts, and it's just because there's some light snow falling. Now, that could change later this week as that big storm develops, and who knows where it ends up. This map doesn't show what's going to be happening Wednesday and Thursday, and that's when that big storm looks like it's going to develop. So when it comes to that big storm, that's going to be hitting West Virginia and Virginia. At least that's what the forecast models are showing right now. So I think that would be a good place to transition to now. Really dive into that big storm because that's a big part of the forecast right there and is certainly going to be something we'll be watching throughout this entire week. As you can see on this map though, not showing up on the impacts winter storm severity index page yet, and that's because it's not till later in the week. So let's see if we actually can find a map that shows us when it will be developing. You can see not much. We have those little light snowstorms going on. Those are moving through. Nothing too exciting there. Possibly getting some good snow throughout parts of the Northeast. New York City could have some moderate impacts with that, but it's a quick mover, light snow, nothing too major there. The one we're watching is first starts to show up around Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. That's where it starts to organize here. And if you think about this, you have your little tiny trough right here. It's pulling in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pulling down that cold Arctic air we've been talking about all video long, and that's combining to form just your ideal winter snowstorm where you have moisture to create the precipitation, and then you have that cold Arctic air to turn that precipitation into snow. So you start to see it just organize here, and the longer it organizes, the stronger it's going to get, because that's the more cold air it'll pull down and the more moisture it'll push in. You can see there's widespread regions of ice as well, so that's certainly going to be a threat for travel as we get into Thursday and Friday. You can see ice stretching all the way from Oklahoma to the East Coast with this system. And that's the perfect divider of where you have those temperatures above freezing and temperatures below freezing. Now, as we move through, you can see that low drop some heavy snow. It's hard to see on this map, so we'll actually dive in and look closer at that in a second. First, let's just, again, take a quick look. It organizes, drops heavy rain over the southeast, and then some heavy snow into West Virginia, some lighter snow into the northeast. So a good place to start would probably be to look in the southeast. That looks like where it's going to be affecting first. But first I want to just take a broad look to see if we can actually see this low, because I was stumbling there because it was actually kind of hard to see on that map. So it should be starting to form around Wednesday and Thursday, and it's about right there. So it looks like this map is a little bit behind, but if you think about it, it's already starting to bring in that moisture. So this is where we could start seeing some light rain over the southeast. And then as that little trough right there pushes closer and closer to the southeast, that's where those winds pick up and we start pulling in even more moisture. Then you can also see that cold air being pulled down, and that is what's driving this possible major snowstorm as we get into Thursday, Friday, and maybe even this weekend a little bit. It's that little tiny trough right there that starts over California. As it moves into the southeast, it strengthens, gets moisture, pulls down cold air, and then goes up into the northeast. Now we're also going to have to keep our eye on that one, because that, at least for the west, looks like an even bigger storm. So we'll have to see what happens to the eastern half of the country with that one as well. Looks like it just kind of disappears and then reorganizes itself. But then another big one, and we could play this game forever where we just continue to click off into the forecast. Let's just actually dive back in, look at some of that precipitation, see when we can first identify that light rain picking up. We have some light rain building in throughout the week. This is the start of that possible major storm. That looks like it's about 1 a.m. on Thursday where we start to get these little cells of heavy rain and even some freezing rain and ice in the more northern locations. Now think of that low pressure system I was just showing. That's what's pulling this moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico. So the areas below where that moisture is being pulled in, some of that moisture is going to drop as rain. And you can see it's heavy rain as we get into Thursday, Friday, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, even down all the way into Louisiana. As that system continues to pull in moisture, the rain continues to fall over the southeast. And some significant rain, I would say, and it looks like it's going to be sticking around for quite some time. Not in the clear throughout this next weekend. So let's see how much rain we're actually going to be picking up with that. That's just the light little systems that we're going to have over the next couple days. That big one looks like it's building in Tuesday. You can start to see it fill in the chart there, and then just clicking through as that moves off. Looks like Mississippi, 2 to 3 inches of rain. Parts of Louisiana could be getting 3 inches of rain. Alabama, 2.5 inches. And Georgia, select locations with 2, although majority of it just maybe 1 to 1.5 inches. Looks like the bullseye and the most rain is right over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, especially the more southern portions. And then looks like Florida's getting some good rain as well. So let's back up. Let's take another look at that low. And then now we're going to dive into it as it moves a little bit farther north from the southeast. So little tiny systems moving through. We'll look at those in a second. But then that's that bigger system as it develops, pulls in moisture, and then that's where we start to get the heavy snow into West Virginia and Virginia. So that's the key place that we're going to be looking at right now. But again, taking a wide look, let's look at where that low originates. It's that little tiny trough off California, moves across the country, pulling in moisture, pulling down cold air, and then it hits right above West Virginia and Virginia. So that's where we're going to be keeping our eye on as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. So you can see here, little tiny snowstorm throughout the day today, working into early tomorrow morning, begin some light snow. I'm not spending too much time on that because it's minor impacts. Doesn't seem like it's going to be too big of a story to talk about. The one we're interested in is this next system building in. As we get into Wednesday night, it looks like we actually might start to get our first little bits of snow as that cold air is being pulled down to West Virginia and Virginia. Some of the heavy snow starts to build in as we get into early Thursday morning. Now, still early Thursday morning, that's where you might have to watch out when you're driving to work. If you are still driving to work, I'm not sure how the whole work from home is still going on across the country, but that's where it looks like there's going to be a large area covered by ice. So that's something you got to watch out for, especially through Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia. And then you can see that snow continues to drop and actually gets stronger as we get into Thursday night and Friday morning for West Virginia and Virginia. That's the area right there where you're enough in the cold air, but still close enough to the moisture where it perfectly combines to give you that heavy snowfall. And it looks, as we back up here, just keep your eye on that area as this storm moves through. It starts off, that's the first place to get snow, and as we click through, that area remains in snow throughout the entire system. So that is where our accumulations are going to be the best, because they're able to accumulate it for the longest period of time. You can see that's exactly what this map shows. This shows total accumulated snowfall. You can see West Virginia and Virginia possibly getting over a foot of snow with this system that could be pushing through. And like I said, this is a little farther off in the forecast. I typically don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out, and it looks like this system is building in Wednesday, Thursday, so we're going to have to watch this one closely. I guarantee the final map will not look like this. I guarantee it will change. The question is how it will change. But as for right now, this is what it's showing. Over a foot of snow for West Virginia and Virginia into the East Coast. I would imagine this will create some major impacts throughout those locations. So let's dive in even closer. There's that little tiny system, just some light rain throughout tomorrow morning, maybe light snow as well. And then the first little bits of that major storm start to push in 7 a.m. on Wednesday. As we get into 1 p.m., that's where some of the heavier snow starts to build in. And this storm is really just getting started. It almost kind of eases back for a second, turns into mostly rain and freezing rain, and then it drops that heavy snow again right there as we get into 7 p.m. Thursday. That's where majority of North Carolina, you're in that heavy rain. Might be some flood concerns there. Northern parts of Virginia and then working into West Virginia as well. That's where we're getting the heavy snow. And again, for commuting on especially Thursday, looks like there's going to be a lot of ice throughout the locations that are above freezing. That's where your precipitation isn't falling as snow. That's where you got to worry about ice instead. So let's look at the totals on this map. That's just the light little storm, and then it starts to build in and continues to build in. By this Saturday, looks like parts of West Virginia, Virginia, that's over a foot stretch right there. Harrisonburg, over a foot right there. Charlottesville, 8 inches. And then working down into Richmond and Roanoke, that's where you're maybe 1 to 2 inches. It'll certainly be interesting to watch where that cold air actually pulls all the way down to, because there's certainly a lot of cold air throughout the country, as we've talked about throughout this entire video. The question is, how far is that cold air actually going to penetrate? So let's back up again do the same thing we did before where we take the wide view, but now we're going to dive into the northeast. So you can see there's actually one little snowstorm building into the northeast tonight and into early tomorrow morning. I'm not spending too much time on that because it just looks like it's going to be a light snowstorm. Minor impacts expected with that one. The possible major snowstorm is the one that's going to be forming Wednesday into Thursday. As you can see, some of the action starting to pick up on the eastern half of the country, but now we're keeping our eye on the northeast here. For the most part, missing the beginning of that storm and then getting the trailing effects of some light snow throughout the region. So as of right now, looks like the bullseye of that heavy snowfall and the heaviest snowfall rates are just south of the northeast in West Virginia and Virginia. But that's why we're going to have to stay updated with this system throughout the week because weather models change. There's no telling if that low will actually end up moving straight into the northeast or sit right off the coast for a number of days. Anything can happen there. I also like taking just the wide view again. Starts that little tiny trough off of California. Watch as it digs down, it strengthens, it's pulling in moisture right here, pulling down cold air right there, and then it moves up and hits the northeast. Now, one thing to note, by the time it hits the northeast, it really doesn't look like it's that strong. If a storm is strong, you're going to see these lines right here. They're isobars. Don't have to worry about it too much. All you have to think about is when a storm is going to be really strong, you'll often see these isobars very vertical, going straight north to south. That's when you have a major system pulling in. By the time this one hits the northeast, they look like they're basically flat. So that's why I'm just expecting some light snow for the northeast with that one. Now, with that being said, you are going to be getting some light snow tonight. Looks like that's going to be some lake effect right there. And then as one little low pressure system moves through, you're going to get widespread snow throughout Pennsylvania, New York, working into New Jersey, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine as well, with that little low pressure system right there. Looks like there are periods early tomorrow morning into tomorrow afternoon where you could have some heavier snowfall, maybe up to 0.05 to 0.1 inches per hour. Not spending too much time on that because it doesn't look too major to me. The one we're watching is this one that for the most part is south of the northeast. Mostly West Virginia and Virginia is getting the bullseye of this snow, but you can see there is the potential for it to move up into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. It's just going to be a question of if it does. And regardless, I think this is pretty likely getting the back end of that system bringing just widespread snow to the entire region. So let's see the actual accumulations that are expected as of right now. That's that first little system we're getting tonight into tomorrow. 2 to 4 inches mostly. Some locations actually around New York City could be getting maybe 4 to 6 inches. We'll have to dive in closer to actually identify that. And then with the bigger snowstorm, the one that has the potential to turn into a major snowstorm, you can see where that bullseye is. Just south of the northeast in West Virginia, Virginia, and then right into the Atlantic, wasting all that good snowfall if you're a winter lover and live in the northeast. But again, we're going to be watching that to see if those high accumulations end up moving farther north. There's a chance they do. This is now looking at all the way into what's accumulated by next Monday. So this time next week, who's to say where that bullseye ends up happening? I do want to take the closer look though, because it looks like there is some heavier snowfall building in today. So this is worth noting. It's not a major system by any means, but it is happening today. So it might be important for you to hear right now. This is 7 a.m. on Tuesday, actually. Looks like that light snow was just building up late tonight. That's what's happening today. It's actually tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Tuesday, when the widespread, kind of heavier snowfall rates start to build in. You can see where we have that cold air, that's where we get snow. The warm air is where we're going to be getting that rain. And again, it's just a fast system. That's why I'm not spending much time on it. It moves through. When does it first shows up? 1 a.m. Tuesday, and it's gone completely by 1 a.m. Wednesday. So you're not going to have much time to accumulate snow because it's not falling for all that long. Let's just see how much that accumulation will be. 2 to 4 inches. So that, that's something. it's an average winter storm. I wouldn't call this one major by any means, but it does stretch over a pretty large region all the way through New York, through Massachusetts. Boston, you're looking like you could get 4 inches. New York City, sorry if I made you excited earlier in the video, looks like you're actually getting about 1.5 inches with that one, just out of the bullseye. From the wide view, it looked like you might have been in it, but yeah, not so much. Let's look at that next system though, because that's the one where we have the potential. That's where a foot to over a foot is dropping down into West Virginia and Virginia. Doesn't look like that's going to be hitting the parts of lower and upper New England, but we'll have to keep our eye on it. And regardless, it looks by this time next week, you'll have picked up maybe 6 inches in some places, 5 inches in New York City by the 16th. So lots of winter weather going on with that multiple snowstorms moving through. Like I said, where we have those higher snowfall rates today, that's where we do have some moderate impacts. That's where the yellow is minor impacts. The orange is moderate impacts. So right there, that's where we're mixing some high population centers with some of that heavier snow. So that's the one place you might want to think about today. Now, with that snow, it's like I said, classic winter weather. We're mixing that snow with some cold Arctic air. And if you're in the Northeast and you have 5 to 10 degree above average temperatures right now, I wouldn't get too comfortable, because this cold air that is 30 to 50 degrees below average in Montana and then working into the Midwest, weather moves west to east. So eventually that's going to find its way into the Northeast. Looks like it actually, you start to feel those effects working into this afternoon, but not nearly as bad as the northern locations of the northern plains and the Midwest, where we're 40 degrees below average. Looks like Northeast will start to feel this, maybe 20 degrees below average, but for the most part, easing up. You're certainly not in this bullseye of cold air. Now, let's continue to click through. You can see it just sits over the middle of the country all the way into Thursday, into Friday. You're still going to be below average in the Northeast, but you're certainly not in this bullseye of cold air yet. Now, this is where the second pulse of cold air moves through. That first one is what we're already starting to see right now. There's a second pulse that looks like it's going to be coming through Friday. This is as a new high pressure system is moving along the region. It's going to do the exact same thing, pull in that cold air, and this is where that cold air looks like it's really going to spread out all the way down from Texas into the Northeast. Let's see when the Northeast finally gets in the bullseye of that cold air. Looks like the worst of it was Monday the 15th. So that means it'll be starting throughout Valentine's Day weekend. If you're working out your plans, keep in mind that it's going to be most likely 20 degrees below average and possibly 40 to 50 degrees below average. We can actually look at the exact temperatures in a second. First, I'll just zoom out to illustrate what's going on with this. We have the low pressure system up here, high pressure system right here. You can see the way the winds work. Counterclockwise up here, which means on the lower part of this low, that's pulling cold air in like that. The high is the opposite. That's where you're clockwise. So on the upper part of the high, that's where you're pulling air in the same direction as the low. So it's these two little systems right there working together to pull that cold air in. And as they continue to work together, you'll actually be able to see that cold air spread throughout the country. Now here is where the second little system starts to move in. I said it was Thursday, Friday. That's where we have a new little system, and then you'll watch this purple air just pour into the country, almost like it almost looks like smoke being poured in, except it's below zero temperatures. You can see right there, 15 to 20 degrees below zero. But keeping our eye on the Northeast here. This is now getting into Saturday. Like I said, Valentine's Day weekend, looks like there's going to be some places below zero, especially in northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. And then as that cold air continues to spread in, you can see it spreading in there. That is eventually going to work its way all the way up into the Northeast. So we're going to have to stay updated with that possible major snowstorm, and we're also going to have to stay updated with these below zero temperatures that look like they're going to be sticking around over the next week. So just to quick summary. We talked about a lot of different things throughout this video. As always, you'll be able to, after I finish this live stream, just click into the time bar or the comments below to click directly into the region you're most interested in. But as for right now, let's just do a summary of everything we talked about. At least I'll try to. We have a couple little snowstorms working through the northwest, midwest, northeast over the next day or two. Nothing too major there. Looks like it's minor impacts, moderate at the most throughout parts of New York. Then, the big story that we're going to be following throughout this entire week is what's going to be happening as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, as there's the possibility of this major snowstorm forming right off the southeast. That's where we're pulling in the moisture. And then up into the Midwest, that's where we're pulling down the cold air. Right on the combination of those two things you need for a big winter storm: moisture to get the precipitation and then cold air to turn that precipitation into snow. That looks like it's going to be building in. And as of right now, it has the bullseye right over West Virginia and Virginia, where we could be seeing over a foot of snow. Now, also significant with that system, though, is the widespread rain. It's going to be bringing all the way from Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all the way up into North Carolina, where we're getting 2 to even 3 inches of rain in some places. So we're going to have to keep our eye on flood watches as well. Like I said, though, bullseye for that system looks to be West Virginia and Virginia right now. Light snow with that one throughout the Northeast, maybe 6 inches within the next week. But we're going to have to keep our eye on it because it's certainly going to change there. The other massive part of the story that we've been talking about throughout this entire video is the Arctic blast of cold air that is already working its way into the country. You can see Montana already 30 to 40 degrees below average, parts of the Midwest 20 to 30. And we have the first pulse of that. That's something we really talked about throughout this video. Looks like that first pulse starts to almost ease back by Wednesday. In the Midwest, you might be thinking you're in the clear, especially if you're in the southern parts of Illinois and Indiana. You might be thinking you're back to average, but it actually looks like there's going to be a second pulse of that cold Arctic air that's going to start to blast in Thursday into Friday. You can see it right there, and then this one looks like it might actually be even colder and even more widespread as it goes through the entire Midwest, all the way down from Texas into the Northeast. I'm just going to show that, click through, try to do it at an even pace because this is just such an amazing graphic. You can see the cold air we have right now, Midwest 30 to 40 degrees below average. Seems like it eases up for a second. We get almost back to average, and then Montana is just freezing this entire time, 30 to 50 degrees below average this entire time. They don't have a second pulse. It's just one giant pulse for Montana throughout this entire pattern. So clicking through again, that's where that second pulse starts to come in. By Valentine's weekend, that's where the entire Midwest looks to be 30 to 50 degrees below average, which means actual temperatures are going to be below zero. Some places could even be 20 to 30 below zero. And then mix in some wind chill, that's when it really gets cold. So we've got multiple snowstorms, we have a possible major snowstorm, and we have temperatures 50 degrees below average. So lots going on over the next week. If you want to stay updated, you can subscribe to this channel where I do these forecast videos every single day. I guarantee the weather forecast will change. The question is just how will they change? So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And I hope you have a great day and a great week, and we'll stay updated with the weather and see what ends up happening.